You had fallen asleep next to Matthew. To your surprise, someone had draped a blanket over you to keep you warm in the middle of the night. Matthew was snuggled deeply in your arms when you woke. You smiled and gently managed to ease yourself out of bed without waking either of the boys. When you went downstairs, you didn't find Arthur attempting to make toast or another easy breakfast food that you taught him how to make for the moments when you weren't around. Instead, you found him at the table with his head cradled in his hands. You gasped and rushed to his side. He gave a startle when you touched him, flinching violently. "Arthur, what's wrong?" you asked. Arthur just shook his head, remaining silent and trying to push you away from him. He didn't want to tell you what was wrong. Personally, he didn't want to get you involved in his own problems. However, since his divorce with his wife, time to himself was scarce. He had lost all of his friends upon marrying his ex-wife. She had forced him away, and after the divorce, they only said, "I told you so," when speaking about his wife. You didn't judge him. You were so kind to him, so good to him that he feared what would happen if you decide you didn't want to be around him anymore. He couldn't lose you. You, however, would not accept his silence. You had to know. You wanted to help him in any way you could. "Please, please tell me what's wrong." He pushed a pile of papers towards you, though it was very hesitantly. You noticed blotches on the paper. Either it had rained on them, which was doubtful because it hadn't rained in weeks, or someone had cried on them and the ink had smeared. You knew which of the two it really was. Arthur had wept because of what was written in the ink, and it made your heart jolt in sheer realization of what this meant. You had never seen him cry before. It was a pile of affidavits, legal paperwork that people would put in for the judge to see about a person involved in a court case. But why would Arthur have these? He hadn't done anything illegal. Nervousness bubbled under your skin regardless. It made you angry that Arthur had cried. "Read them," he requested softly. So you did. They were the single most gut-wrenching and sickening collection of documents you had ever read in your entire life. There were 5 in all, but each gave examples of how Arthur was unfit as a father and undeserving of his children. You put a hand to your mouth to keep from retching. Arthur was a drunkard. He was poor. He had a girlfriend. Did they mean you? You weren't dating, but how did they know you visited? He had a temper. He would lash out violently. He swore. He used to work at a strip bar. You didn't know that about him, but you weren't about to ask just at the moment. He used to work at a bar. Also, another fact you didn't know. He hadn't been he had been in several bar fights before. It seemed that any and every dark secret, any skeleton that Arthur might have in the closet was being dragged out and into the conflict and exposed for the judge to see. My ex and her husband, they're trying to take the boys." Your heart clenched. You could only stare at him for a moment as you floundered for something to say to that. But all the words just vanished from your lips the moment thought seemed to touch into your mind. Francis and Arthur's former wife were trying to take the boys from Arthur? Why? They hadn't wanted the boys 6 years ago. Why would they make a move and take them back now? They were happy with their father. They were happy with you. It made no sense to uproot them from a happy life that they had known for so long. It was a cruel and heartless thing to do without the boys' permission. They weren't unhappy. They would have said something, particularly Alfred, with how vocal he was to express complaints. What are you going to do? I don't know, listener, he whispered. I can't afford an attorney, listener. She never paid child support. Everything I make goes to keeping the boys happy. You bit your lip. It explained why he never took the boys out for dinner, why he was embarrassed when you insisted on paying for everyone for a meal, but never questioned why he wouldn't offer to pay for you. It was that he couldn't pay for you, especially since he was going back to school to get his degree in English. But there had to be something you could do. You hadn't known his finances were bad, though it did explain why he was in the neighborhood near the college. It was known for being cheap, but sometimes dangerous when crime was involved. Your parents worried about you enough to call you every Friday at 6 p.m. on the dot. If you were even a minute late, your mother worried like no tomorrow. Don't you see, listener? She won. She always does. Now she's taking my boys. You suddenly saw red. You slapped them across the face. You just acted before you thought, but quitter talk too soon into the game was not something you would just sit there and take. Arthur just stared at you in surprise. The anger from your face, the anger on your face surprised him. Matthew and Alfred needed Arthur to stay strong, or else they would lose their home, their dad, and the life they had come to know in their 6 years of living. You weren't about to let them become uprooted. Passion burned in your heart. Your promise to Matthew was on the forefront of your mind. He feared you wouldn't want to keep him. You were about to prove just how much you would do to fight for those little boys and Arthur. Francis and his wife just made an enemy out of you. I will not let her take our boys away. Ours, Poppet? Arthur stammered. Your expression softened when you caught the surprised look on his face. You had practically just admitted you thought of the family as an extension of your own, minus admitting your undying love for Arthur. But he knew you loved his sons. You told the boys every day before you left for the day back to your house right across the street. Luckily, you had gotten new roommates, a woman named Elizaveta and her friend Lily. Elizaveta's boyfriend, Roderick, visited often, and Lily's brother was there every day until it was late, and then he went home for the night. Sometimes, he just ended up staying and crashing on the couch. More than once, you draped a blanket over him. You gently touched Arthur's cheek, the one you slapped. Tears welled up in your eyes for letting your emotions get the best of you. I thought you would have figured it out by now, he whispered. I love you. I love the boys. Arthur quickly looked away from you, thoroughly embarrassed now. You swallowed thickly. He hadn't said anything back, so he didn't love you the way you did for him. Well, that was fine, you told yourself. You would still do anything for the family. That was what mattered. You let your hand drop, and you got back to your feet. You missed the look on Arthur's face as you walked towards the kitchen sink. His fingers itched to touch you again, but he refrained, expecting you to be disgusted by the fact he needed so much help. Neither of you knew how much you meant to each other, but now that the elephant was in the room, you didn't want to discuss it. You had other things to take care of first, but still, you couldn't deny the hurt you felt deep within your chest. I can talk to my parents. They know an attorney. Maybe she'll do us a favor. I'll do anything to help. But please, please don't push me away, Arthur. Not now. Though you said you would talk to your parents, you were terrified to ask for help with this. What would they think when you brought Arthur and the boys over for lunch and in the same breath asked for a lawyer to help fight the battle for his sons? It wouldn't be pretty. Your mom might be a little more understanding, but your dad, on the other hand, well, you hoped Arthur would be able to hold his own. But you gathered Arthur and packed up the boys, finding yourself on your parents' front doorstep. You started driving to your parents' house, calling on the way to tell them you would be stopping by with guests, asking that your parents invite the attorney you knew. Imagine the surprise on your mother's face when she found you standing on her doorstep with Arthur, Matthew, and Alfred. Mom, can we come in? You questioned. Your mother nodded slowly, still not sure what to expect from you and your strange guests, but she knew you had come a long way. It would be rude to turn Arthur and his boys aside after such a travel. She was the one you didn't have to win over. Matthew and Alfred would do that for you. She had been nagging you for grandkids, and maybe if Arthur felt the same. But no, he hadn't admitted that he loved you back. He knew your feelings, but you don't know his. It made you nervous, but regardless, you pushed the emotion aside with practiced ease. You smiled, then led the way in. You then knelt down in front of the boys, helping them get their shoes off before looking at them in the eyes. My room is upstairs, you said. It's the second room on the right. Why don't you go watch some TV until lunch? Okay, Alfred chirped. Your mother watched in fascination as the boys listened to you, perhaps as they would their own mother. But there was just Arthur. A wife was nowhere to be seen. This worried your mother. You couldn't have gotten pregnant without her knowing. Those boys were older too, but you smiled at them as if they were your sons, and she could see this paternal gesture on your face as you watched them. Alfred took Matthew's hand and led him upstairs, hand in hand. Komajiro was dangling from Matthew's free hand as they rushed to check out your room. They were probably hoping to find something cool, but all of your childlike things had been taken out when you moved out. The boys brushed past your dad when he walked down the steps. Listener, it's good to see you. Dad! Your father enveloped you in a hug, a tight one with his arms wrapped tightly around your shoulders, squeezing you protectively. You rolled your eyes over your father's back while your mother giggled. She knew you were exasperated with the man for treating you like you were made of glass. You appreciated the tender care sometimes, but others you wanted to learn and make mistakes for yourself. Arthur shyly stepped out of the way. Your father had subtly pushed him away from you, not wanting Arthur to be near you at all. He didn't like that you had brought a strange man home, a man with children at that. You had been telling them about Arthur and his boys, but it never seemed to click in his mind that Arthur was the father of Matthew and Alfred. He just assumed the boys were two that you were babysitting, and Arthur was the guy you had met and taken a liking to. She brought Arthur and the boys, your mother informed him. Oh, is that so? Your father pulled out of the hug. He began to eye Arthur down, trying to figure out what type of person Arthur was. Arthur shifted uncomfortably under your father's piercing gaze. He looked like Alfred did when scolded for sneaking into the cookie jar before dinner, but managed to stand tall, defiant almost, because he knew that if he showed weakness now, he wouldn't be able to make it into court with your family's attorney. He looked to you for support, but you only smiled tentatively. Your father was a touch overprotective. Your mother understood to help others. Your need to help others, but that did not always mean that she approved of it. The Brit was going to learn this the hard way, but his kids would be spared the most your father's scrutiny, though he would watch how they behaved around you. Does this have any reason why she's coming over? Sort of. You nervously looked over at Arthur, wondering if you should divulge the affidavits from his wife and ex-best friend for the rights to his sons. The thought made you very angry. It was as if the children were no better than toys on the playground to fight over. With everything else that occurred, well, it only made your blood boil. It was his personal life. You didn't have the right to share something as personal as that. You feared he wouldn't like sharing what had happened with your family, but he nodded firmly. He would tell them what had happened. You felt your heart go out to him. It had to have been very hard to tell complete strangers how terrible his life was. Listener, may I speak with you for a moment? Your father asked. You knew this was bad news, especially since your dad wanted to speak alone. But slowly, you nodded, agreeing to speak with him. A deep breath calmed your nerves as you followed your dad to the hallway. You could see your mother fluttering around Arthur and smiling and chattering. A nervous smile crossed Arthur's lips as he spoke with your mother. God, that accent make you shiver. Then you shook your head. Right, you were speaking with your dad. You have to focus on this or you could completely blow it for the Kirkland family. You certainly didn't want to do that for them, especially not after that conversation with Matthew. He needed you. Alfred needed you, and whether Arthur would admit it or not, he needed you too for your connection to the lawyer. Listener, why are you doing this? Your father demanded. Dad, he needs at least one person on his side, Maybe if other people, really, listener, you can't take in all of the lost puppies in the world. And what is it with your desire to take in the most mangy and wild of the lot? You glowered at your father just because Arthur was down on his luck, and that didn't mean that he was mangy. He was a hard-working man who put his children over himself, sacrificing countless hours and toiling away to barely make a living. You didn't know how he did it before he met you. You certainly liked helping the Brit. The boys were more than delightful to watch and care for, and Arthur wasn't too bad of company himself. Who were you kidding? You knew you had completely fallen for him after the first night, especially after the kiss that Alfred had insisted upon. You just felt something inside you click after that night. You would have given an arm and leg to have a repeat performance. Arthur is not a mangy wild dog, you countered. No more than half of the other people in this world. Why do you insist on defending him? Your father demanded. Well, don't tell me you're actually falling for that man, he breathed. You blushed hotly. Your dad hit the nail on the head. Horror crossed the man's face when he saw the look on yours. He didn't want to believe that you were falling in love with a man that already had children and that was having marital problems. Though your father didn't know that yet, and that he worked at the bar. Arthur was poor, barely able to fend for himself, let alone his children. He had been embarrassed when you had bought him a jacket as a gift for Valentine's Day, because you noticed he didn't have a winter coat, though Alfred and Matthew did. Just because he married the wrong person didn't mean he should be punished for it. I won't allow it, listener. He has kids, and you're just throwing yourself into a bad situation. I love him! Your father stared at you in surprise. His expression softened as he recalled the look before on your mother when she defended your father to your grandfather. She hadn't He just didn't want to lose you to this man, or to any man for that matter. You were his child after all. He had to be protective of what was his. You were his precious listener. It hurt him deeply to know that he had already lost the battle for you, but he was not about to lose the war. If Arthur wanted to keep you by his side, he was going to have to prove that he was capable of taking care of you first, which meant that he was going to receive the third degree from your old man. However, both of you predicted this coming. Arthur had said it would happen. Baby doll, I don't want you making a mistake for this guy, your father said. He's a good person who hit some bad times, Dad. Besides, she owes me a favor. A pro bono is the least she could do. There was a knock at the door. Your heart skipped a beat. You looked at your dad, giving him a pleading look. He frowned and folded his arms across his chest. Apparently, he had more to say on the subject, but with the attorney there, he didn't really want to say something in front of her. Begrudgingly, he nodded his head, letting you go for now. You knew he wasn't finished, even as you gave him a swift hug for letting it go for the moment. But he was not fully convinced that you should be around Arthur, especially now that he knew of your feelings for the Brit. Curse her blushing. Why did you have to give it away the moment anyone mentioned love and Arthur? You felt your face heat up again. The attorney is here, listener, your mother called. You walked down the hallway, your father hesitantly following behind you. You found your friend waiting for you, so you walked over and gave the attorney a firm hug. You had met her in high school and became fast friends. She went towards law and you leaned towards your chosen degree, but kept in touch. She often invited you out for tea once a week or so, just to catch up on the weekly happenings. As of late, she had gotten engaged to a police officer she had met a while back. You were happy for her. She deserved a bit of happiness with all things considering. You just hoped she wasn't too busy to take up the case. Thank you for doing this for me, Kita. For you, listener, I'd do anything, I said. Now, let's get started. Dinner went over as well as you expected. Your father was giving Arthur the third degree, questioning him constantly and trying to cut into his personality until I started asking my own questions about the case I was taking on. Your mother gushing over every little thing Arthur said or what the boys did. I laughed when I got the full details, surprising you and Arthur. I had nearly doubled over in laughter when I found out who the couple was who was trying to take the boys. Francis and Michelle had some issues with foreclosure and monetary issues. Francis's restaurant had been burned down in a kitchen fire, and Michelle's family finally cut them off all the wealth. You moved to help Alfred butter his roll because he had been struggling as I explained this. This case should be an easy mark, I said. Are you sure? You asked. Apparently they're well off. We have Judge Romano, I cried. The last man who would try to bribe him, and the jury faced jail time. You smiled softly. Things were starting to look up a bit. Hey guys, so this is part 3 of Daddy Dearest. I hope you enjoyed me reading that. So leave a like, subscribe, and share if you can. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.